Welcome back to Nationwide. Now, in Ireland, we are constantly reminded of our turbulent history. Scattered throughout the country, there are past historical events that have been hidden for centuries. The Adopt a Monument scheme, initiated by the Heritage Council, encourages communities to uncover the history in their own area. Helen McInerney went to visit 2 southeast communities just to see what they've uncovered in their local area.
Tucked away down a boreen in County Waterford is one of the most exciting discoveries of Ogham stones in Ireland. Ogham is described as early Irish writing, and when the community of Knockboy in rural Waterford began cleaning up their medieval cemetery as part of the Adopt a Monument initiative, little did they realise what they would uncover.
I'm from the area, born and reared just up the road. My father's buried up in the corner there, and his aunts and uncles also. I had no interest in this type of stuff, say 20 years ago, but as you get older, you feel an appreciation for things of antiquity, I suppose, yeah.
The graveyard in Knockboy dates back centuries.
12th century?
Possibly.
Possibly the 12th century, yeah. And as I was saying to Tom, it was built in, the graveyard and the church is built in the middle of nowhere. There's no roads. They probably put the boreen in.
Something that came from here.
But people walked all around this area.
Right.
And this was probably the most central spot.
As work began on clearing the site, some very interesting discoveries were made.
We think it may have originally been an early church site. We're not certain, but there are some key indicators. I mean, the surviving church itself here would be more 14th or even 15th century, but there are a few things, for example, the Ogham stones that were found built into the church were probably from this immediate area.
And what year then would that indicate that they date from, that they tell you it's older?
Well, the Ogham stones themselves, from what survives, we think they date from the 6th century. We do have a holy well over in the field over there as well, Tombollard. So that as well would suggest an early church site here. It's great to find so many at one site because in most cases Ogham stones are found individually. Now we do have other cases of multiple Ogham sites, but this one is quite special in that so many are built into the actual church structure. They're used as lintels over the windows, over the door. We do have other examples of 1 or 2 Ogham stones built into later medieval churches like this, but this is unique in the number of stones used and found at the site.
The church at Knockboy, known as Sescanán Church, dates from medieval times, and it's described as a fine example of a medieval parish church. However, it was in danger of collapse and needed immediate attention. Tombollard, a conservation stonemason, and his team consider themselves very lucky to be awarded the work at Knockboy when funding became available in 2018. Tom lives just half an hour away from the site, but he was unaware of its existence.
I've passed this boreen more times and never knew it was here. So my first visit here was to come down and just have a look at the place because the method statement, so the engineers would have suggested a method of works to address the problems here. So I came down obviously to prep for work and see what we needed to do and what was ahead of us. So my first visit here was on a wet day, and even then I could see, like, it's an amazing place. The scenery, the actual structure just blew me away. I love the medieval, so I was very, very happy that we'd got a chance even to express an interest in coming here. The people here, you've met Tomas and Tom, and I've been working with Nora and all the team here. But it's amazing what a community can do. They can take what was covered in ivy, what was falling apart, and highlight the problem, go through the process and actually secure funding. And actually, even before funding, they've actually secured recognition from Adopt a Monument. Adopt a Monument have said, your application, it spoke to us, it had merit. And that's, that for a community must be brilliant alone.
When the group in Knockboy applied for funding from the Adopt a Monument initiative, their application was viewed very favourably.
If you're working in conservation, you're not really worried so much about the budget. You're hoping, I hope I get a really nice, tasty building that we can get our hands into. And when you meet a committee like this through Adopt a Monument, that's when you can see this process working, and it's really worked here.
The site has been described as a real gem by Bernadette Guest, Heritage Officer with Waterford City and County Council.
I was aware of the site because of its uniqueness. I mean, it's a real gem. I mean, where else would you find a site with 6 Ogham stones incorporated into the structure? Because, I mean, Waterford is quite important for Ogham stones after Cork and Kerry. We have a number of Ogham stones on display in Mount Mellery, in the Heritage Centre there, and also you can visit the National Museum. But this is basically like an outdoor museum where you can actually see them incorporated into a building. And I suppose it's like an example of modern upcycling, if you like, whereby the stones were incorporated from, I presume, the immediate landscape, the immediate vicinity. We think that, I mean, this church dates from the 14th, 15th century, but we think the Ogham stones were probably taken as headstones from an earlier Christian site or a pagan cemetery. So there's a great sense of history in this site.
Since the Adopt a Monument initiative began, about 20 different communities have participated.
And every one of them is very different as well. Some of them are very much about the conservation. Some of the sites are about trying to understand what it is and what the story of the place could be. Other groups might be more interested in making sure that the site is nice and safe and fun to access for people to, as a tourism kind of asset. In this case, it was very much about conservation. And of all the projects, this one and maybe one or two others, they were the ones that kept me up at night a little bit, during the storms. Is it actually going to go in the winter? So to see the progress over the last number of years, and that's thanks to a partnership between the community, the council, NORA, the Heritage Council as well. Without that collaboration, and of course with the great skills of Tom too, the site would have been lost, essentially.
Many of the local people who became involved in the Adopt a Monument initiative have relatives buried within the graveyard.
Yeah, I would know a good few of them because they're all neighbours. My father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather were all buried here. Most of the neighbours, naturally the graveyard is in Knockboy and we're in the townsland of Knockboy, so, you'd be inclined to be buried here.
It's nice to keep these things alive, hopefully in the next generation.
And we know it will be here standing for our children and maybe for their children.
Irish people have a really strong connection to their heritage, and I think the idea of supporting people to engage with their heritage just struck a nerve, because what it's really about is partnership. If you think of this project, it's about a partnership between the local community, local government and national government. So a scheme like Adopt a Monument, the kind of Heritage Council approach to projects like this is you support people, you enable them, you provide a small amount of funding and you just help them engage with their heritage. And I think we just found a good vehicle for doing that.